Aliens, UFOs, and goodness knows what else in the sky, oh my. May I offer you some 10-foot tall aliens? A video showing two human-like creatures on top of a hill on an island in Brazil is gaining a lot of traction on social media. According to a report, the beings were, 10 feet tall, and they were spotted on Ilha do Mel, which is an island more than 3 kilometers off of the coast of southeast Brazil. Now this is a nice little spot for environmentally conscious travelers and beach lovers, and it's celebrated for its varied ecosystems. It's about 5 kilometers in length, 800 meters in width, and it's a scenic mosaic of natural marvels, according to the folks who visit there. So if we're looking at the video of we got our two big beings, we got one, and we got a second one standing nearby, and their appearance on the hilltop sparked a lot of buzz amongst locals. They're standing pretty confidently on top of the hill, and apparently that top of the hill, hard to get to for normal people, and the shrubbery, it barely hits their knees. They were like walking around, swinging their arms in a very human-like manner, but not enough to convince people that these weren't aliens. Somebody said in the video, it's too big to be a person. Look at the way he moves, it's really weird. Look at the size, it's very fast. Now somebody else said, for me, it's enough to see the speed with which this creature goes down the hill. Anyone who has done trails on hills like this knows you don't go down a hill like this in 1 to 2 minutes. The way they move reminds me a lot of the Men in Black critters, which like, no thank you. One other person wrote, one thing I do know, I will never step there again. Now even the Brazilian government had something to say. Wow, something other than, we have nothing to say. Now they were like, oh yeah, oh my gosh, surreal, what happened? This was not a confirm nor deny, but that very much felt like a confirm. Folks, what are you tweeting out these days? And is your Twitter okay? Good old malls, usually home to folks just walking around, a lot of senior walking groups, the most annoying families you will ever encounter. Trust me, I did my time in a mall. But apparently on the first day of 2024, the Miami Mall, over in Florida, might just have been home to something a little more out of this world, and not just your usual Florida mans. Apparently a group of around 50 folks caused a riot at Bayside Marketplace, which is an outdoor mall roughly 5 miles away from South Beach, according to the Miami Police Department. Now these folks were setting off fireworks, which obviously led to a panic, because a lot of folks assumed there was a much more major crime. Now this was a statement from the Miami Police Department, and eventually 4 folks were arrested. So obviously when people are arrested, it's because police have been dispatched. They gotta control a crowd. There's a lot of people holiday shopping. Some businesses were temporarily closed to allow folks to clear the area, and the police were like, look, there's no aliens, nothing to do with this. No airports were closed, nothing's being withheld from the public, LOL. Well, folks, that's what people in power always say, so I believe that statement as far as I can throw it, especially with the LOL. Because here's the thing, in the days after the incident, folks on social media launched a heck of a frenzy. They were like, no. Miami Mall aliens, this is a thing. They believe that police were responding to aliens, not, used to getting up to trouble. Several people reviewed video of the incident circulating online, and they claimed they could see an alien figure in the grainy footage. Now everybody else was just like, meme, because that's what we do on the internet. To quote a post I saw on the app formerly known as Twitter, they said, 10-foot aliens / creatures caught on camera, fired at inside and outside Miami Mall, media silent, cops are covering it up, saying people were fighting with fireworks, yet all these cop cars and air traffic stopped that night except for black military choppers, and no media coverage. Wow, I'm getting a really bad case of deja vu, folks. Government cover-ups. Now clips taken from that viral video were crazy reshared on social media, and yeah, people claim they saw 8 to 10 foot tall aliens. So look, we've got the low quality clip, and it does appear to show a tall glowing figure near police vehicles. Look, I've seen videos that were less likely to be aliens turn out to be worth something in terms of being the genuine article, so I'm not dismissing it. Here's the thing, what if every Florida man photo or meme was just an alien trying to blend in here on Earth and failing? So imagine that you're a homeowner, you're going out into your backyard just to throw away the trash, and suddenly you're nose to nose with an alien. Now, I don't think that's going to happen to me in this lifetime, because owning a house in this economy? So last June there was a video circulating on the app formerly known as Twitter, and it depicted a non-human entity appearing briefly and blinking. The footage revealed a distinct form featuring 2 large eyes, aligning with, well, somebody called in, and that matched their description. The caller reported, there's like an 8-foot tall person, and there's somebody else, and there's big eyes, and it's looking at us, and it's there. So we've got a video. You can see 3 men and a woman. They're trying to record this so-called non-human creature, and one of them is armed with a personal safety device, and they all appeared visibly frightened by the presence of this non-human entity. Yeah, there was no official police statement, but there was footage accessed by the local news, where you do see one officer walking into said backyard to investigate, and the witnesses are telling the police like, I don't believe in it, but what I saw right now, I do believe in. And the officer was like, yeah, you guys seem like legit scared, so I don't blame you. Now obviously the police closed the case because they're like, oh, there's nothing concrete here, but come on folks, we all know better. So sometime over the last year, multiple people recorded footage of a glowing orange light hovering in the sky over none other than Canada's Wonderland. Now me, being the skeptic that I am, I actually doubted the influx of videos I was being sent until I had time to sit down and watch them. And I don't know what it could be other than a UFO. Like, I'm all too familiar with the air traffic over that park. So originally I was like, okay, maybe it's one of the many millions of holiday lights they have glowing in their park because it's Christmas. Pretty sure that video was taken in the winter. But the glowing figure goes from being vertical in one video to completely horizontal in another, and it kind of alternates between staying solitary and moving around. So it doesn't look like any drone I've ever seen in this lifetime, and technically drones are not allowed to be flown directly over the park. Don't ask me how I know, I just kind of know. So like, maybe the aliens wanted to see what a theme park was like. Like, I don't know. It's Christmas, it's cute. We're gonna time travel back a little 13 years, and we're gonna go to the Vatican. So here's a headline for you to chew on. Was Rome visited by unidentified flying objects? So according to reports, there was a UFO flap that happened in Rome, and strange objects were caught on camera, not once, not twice, but several times. I think the most important footage is there's this odd luminous formation, and this was captured by 3 security guards stationed in front of the residence of the US ambassador to the Vatican. Now, these are pretty credible witnesses. They're guys that are like trained experts in air surveillance. I believe it was 4 a.m. June 7th, and these guys were like, yeah, we spotted 3 spherical bright objects hovering in the sky above St. Peter's Dome in the Vatican, right in the center of Rome. So obviously they're like, hey, we've got a cell phone, let's see what we're doing here. And from their point of observation, they stopped a police patrol. They were like, okay, maybe it could be a commercial plane. Nope, not a jet fighter, not a balloon. And they were looking at the swift maneuvers that this object was taking, and it was darting towards the sky. It was like a whole formation. There was luminous dots that were suspended at like 300 feet above the ground. And they said, there is no way a conventional airplane could do such things. The UFO disappeared and reappeared for brief moments, with sudden changes of altitude before it darted, I believe, westbound at like a 40-degree angle. Now the police were like, hey, we're reporting this. Like, they alerted the central police station in Rome, and we do have the video, which was acquired by the Italian police. Now, a lot of TV networks also took this news seriously. There was a anchorwoman who said, we will now show you exclusive footage of a UFO sighting in Rome. Folks were taking this seriously. The Brazilian Roswell incident, known as the Varginha case, has resurfaced, igniting intrigue and sparking rumors of potential creature footage. So back in 1996, this incident garnered global attention, featuring a UFO crash, an alleged extraterrestrial encounter, and a subsequent military cover-up, despite official government denials. It's every UFO expert and alien lover's dream. It also sounded like science fiction. To be technical, on January 13th of 1996, the United States Air Force took down a UFO, an unidentified flying object, which crashed 6 miles from a medium-sized town in southeastern Brazil. And this enigma remains one of Brazil's most famous UFO cases, drawing a lot of UFO tourism to the area. So witnesses recounted a bizarre event on that day, when a strange cigar-shaped object crashed down. Locals observed its gradual descent, describing it as resembling a struggling washing machine. Now, this incident was followed by the arrival of military personnel who quickly cordoned off the area. Now, subsequently, a group of 3 girls claimed to have encountered a strange creature with brown, oily skin, V-shaped feet, a large head, and huge red eyes. Now, the Brazilian military later was like, oh no, this creature is just a homeless guy covered in mud. But the witnesses were like, absolutely not. This creature eventually adopted the nickname the ET of the area, and it seemed to be wobbly, unsteady on its feet. The girls assumed it was injured or sick, so they fled. They told their mother they'd seen the devil, and yeah. Now, standing out in a different way was the creature's distinct odor. One ghastly inhale would weaken the knees. According to one of the witnesses, for 20 days they smelled its smell, and they couldn't stand it. They didn't know where it came from, they washed out their nose with everything they could think of, and it still stunk in there. As for the strange creature's demeanor, the woman unanimously agreed. It was muddle-headed. When the creature wagged its big noggin dizzily in their direction, that's when they bolted. They recalled pretty well the creature's fearful expression and alien characteristics, leading them to believe with absolute certainty this is not a human, this is not an animal. Now, the mystery deepened when 2 military police officers reportedly captured the creature, only for one of them to suffer a fatal infection shortly afterwards. And by the way, the girls have not changed their testimony in the more than 25 years now that have passed since the events. So after Everything touched down, rumors were spreading like wildfire. A lot of folks were like, yeah, no, we saw more UFOs before this. Later on, claims were made of additional unidentified creatures or extraterrestrial beings that were being collected and observed at a hospital. There were talks of military, police, and government trucks and personnel being really active in the area. There was an unidentified creature prowling a local forest. And then you add in that death that I mentioned earlier, and apparently there was also some unexplained animal deaths at the local zoo. UFO experts would later allege links between these and other claims, including the claim that one of the initial creature witnesses was allegedly impregnated by the creature. So going back to the military stuff, apparently 6 miles away from the crash site, the military set up quite a blockade in a residential neighborhood. Now sources say the local fire department, which is under the control of the military police, they captured one of the creatures in the morning, and then another officer captured a second near where the 3 girls had seen it that afternoon. A lot of folks were like, okay, well, I saw something. There was that cigar-shaped flying object. There was all these troops, and there was a lot of activity going on at the hospital. So when you add in all the UFO experts that were coming onto the scene, and of course the media, and the residents were like, look, 2 + 2 = 4. An official inquiry led by the Brazilian military concluded in 2010 that allegedly the woman had just encountered this homeless, mentally unstable man named Mudinho. The commander of the 24th Police Battalion military presented photographs of this citizen. They were like, yeah, no, they're not great, but they said, no, they're not great mentally. The physical characteristics match the description. And they said, like, look, maybe because this person was covered in dirt and then they were crouching, the 3 terrified girls just thought they were a space creature. And the head of the official inquiry also reported that the military trucks and personnel were performing just routine duties in the area. They're like, oh, this is just periodic maintenance. It just, normal that we set up random blockades in residential neighborhoods after people see this random homeless man that looks kind of weird. This was incorrectly interpreted as firefighters in the military and capture and whatnot. Just routine stuff. Skeptic Brian Dunning criticized the sensationalized media accounts and the claims. According to Brian, it is the most compelling example of a case where literally nothing at all happened that was remotely unusual, and it was magnified into a case that was considered, proof, absolute proof of alien visitation by many. And he's like, look, to those believers, I would suggest recalibrating where you set the bar for quality of evidence. Well, sir, I've talked about a lot of alien stories, and this one seems pretty real. There was a young woman named Nilda who said, for extraterrestrials, they may not be much, but they're the biggest thing we've had around here. She said, look, had the armed forces not interfered, maybe the locals might have, helped out the visitors, taught them local language, integrated them into the community. But Nilda said that the extraterrestrials never had a chance. Her anger at the military's alleged inhospitality actually sparked a tiff with her boyfriend, who was in the military. She claims that to some extent, the army was paying for their past sins. So during an oppressive 20-year dictatorship ending in 1985, the Brazilian military eliminated a number of earthbound political enemies by disappearing them. So in her mind, if the army was capable of liquidating human beings without a trace, why couldn't it carry such a dirty war to outer space? So, at the army base near Varginha, an inquiry concerning the extraterrestrials was received by a private, who turned it over to a sergeant, who then passed it to a major, who then sent it back down to another sergeant, who handed it over to Captain Eduardo Calza. And he's like, I used to get calls about the base talent show, not this. Now, Captain Calza says he can't vouch for what the 3 witnesses saw, but the activity on the base that fateful weekend was, according to him, anything but otherworldly. New inductees to a sergeant's training school went on parade, a truck convoy was driven to the repair shop. Now, at the town hospital, trucks delivered new cardiovascular equipment and, wait for this folks, an ambulance dropped off an exhumed corpse. But he's like, no, it was a human body. Now, bring in Vittorio Peccaccini, a UFO investigator who said, yeah, sure, tell us another story. Based upon interviews with witnesses, Mr. Peccaccini has pieced together what he considers to be a more plausible reconstruction of those events. He believes that a small alien craft on an unknown mission over the area crashed near city limits, sending its crew of smelly, spaced-out extraterrestrials, meandering about the town. And then, military squads in camouflage fatigues hunted down the visitors, poked and prodded the corpses at the municipal hospital. Now, the alleged proof that he has are videotaped statements by two young men in civilian clothes who claim to be members of the military detail that disposed of the alien visitors. Now, it is impossible to determine the tape's authenticity because, and rightfully so, Mr. Paccaccini won't reveal the men's names. Why? Well, they're in fear for their lives. So yes, technically there is a bit of a lack of physical evidence, unless you count descriptions of a paw print seen by one witness. And apparently it resembles like what a human hand would look like, with the palm flat and a space opened up between the ring and pinky fingers, so right about here, and the other 3 digits. Look, it kind of looks kind of Star Trek-y, but work with me here. There was a documentary that happened recently, Moment of Contact, and it reignited a lot of interest in the case. It featured interviews with witnesses and an anonymous whistleblower known as Military X, and they claimed to have been involved in transporting the creature's body to the ESA Army base. And his description of the creature's oily skin and the foot only added to our evidence. There was a college professor and amateur pilot, Carlos de Sousa, said he witnessed the crash on that very day. He described the spacecraft as the size of a school bus, but shaped like a submarine, with white smoke leaking out of a gash in the back. Once again, he's comparing it to a malfunctioning washing machine, rocking and jerking about in the sky. So when he ran to the site of the crash, he saw pieces of metal, like thin aluminum foil, spread across the field. He picked up a piece of it, crumpled it in his hand, and then let it go. And at that point, it actually returned to its original shape. Immediately afterwards, the military showed up, and they were like, okay, you, get out of here. They were ordering him away with... I'm just saying. Betty and Barney Hill were a married couple that lived in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. They decided to spontaneously take a road trip, a well-earned break that Barney decided the couple needed. Barney at the time worked a grueling night shift at the post office, driving 60 miles each way. Betty's job handling state welfare cases was no easier. So after 16 months of marriage, they saw this as their delayed honeymoon, if you will. On the last night of their 3-day trip, the tired couple sipped coffee in a Vermont diner to recharge before driving back. Barney figured, hey, if we push through, we can beat the wind and the rains and the incoming hurricane. So this UFO sighting happened around 10:30 p.m. on September 19th of 1961, just south of Lancaster, New Hampshire, when Betty noticed a bright point of light in the sky that moved from below the moon and the planet Jupiter upwards to the west of the moon. So while Barney was driving, Betty reasoned that she was observing a falling star, but she's like, no, it's moving upwards, that doesn't make sense. So because it was moving erratically and it was getting bigger and brighter, Betty convinced Barney to stop the car for a closer look. Barney obliged, stopped at a picnic area just south of Twin Mountain. Now by this point, Betty had dug out her binoculars for a closer look and described seeing an odd-shaped aircraft flashing multicolored lights traveling across the face of the moon, believing it to be a flying saucer based off of stories she had heard from her sister. She said, Barney, if you think that's a satellite or a star, you're being completely ridiculous. Here's the thing. He knew she was right. The Hill said they continued driving on the isolated road, moving very slowly in order to observe the object as it came even closer. So at one point, the object passed above a restaurant and signal tower on top of Cannon Mountain, and then came out near the Old Man of the Mountain. So Betty has testified that it was at least 1.5 times the length of the granite cliff profile, which was like 40 feet long, and it seemed to be rotating. At one point, the object descended rapidly towards their vehicle, causing Barney to stop in the middle of the highway. This huge, silent craft hovered about 80 to 100 feet above the Hill's 1957 Chevrolet Bel Air and filled the entire field of view in the windshield. Carrying his firearm in his pocket, Barry stepped away from the vehicle and moved closer to the object, which he later said was roughly the size of a huge pancake. Still using the binoculars, Barney claimed to have seen 8 to 11 humanoid figures peering out of the craft's windows, seemingly looking at him. In his report to investigator Walter Webb of the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena, otherwise known as NICAP, Barney described specifically that these beings were somehow not human. In unison, all but one figure moved to what appeared to be a panel on the rear wall of the hallway that encircled the front portion of the craft. The one remaining figure continued to look at Barney and communicated a message, telling him to stay where you are and keep looking. Barney had a recollection of observing the humanoid forms wearing glossy black uniforms and black caps. Red lights on what appeared to be bat-wing fins began to telescope out of the sides of the craft, and a long structure descended from the bottom of the craft. The silent aircraft approached what Barney estimated was within 50 to 80 feet overhead and like 300 feet away from him. Now, we're about to have a moment of, wait, Alexa, you're jumping over things. Nope. Not arriving home till dawn, the Hill stated that they had some odd sensations and impulses they couldn't explain. Now they're obviously very confused, just like you are, dear viewer. And the Hills say they tried to reconstruct what exactly had happened the night before, but their memories were incomplete and fragmented. See, not just me. After sleeping for a couple of hours, Betty awoke and placed the shoes and clothing she had worn during the drive into her closet, observing that the dress was torn at the hem, the zipper, the lining, and later noted a pinkish powder on the dress. Over the years, I think at least 5 different laboratories have conducted chemical and forensic analyses on the dress and came up with nothing. Oh, this wasn't the only damage to items in their possession though. Barney says that the leather strap for the binoculars was torn, but he didn't remember how. The toes of his best dress shoes were scraped, and their watches were broken, and no matter what, they never worked again. There were shiny concentric circles, similar to the rings you'd find on a tree trunk on the car's trunk, that had definitely not been there the previous day, and Betty and Barney experimented with a compass, noting that when they moved it close to the spots, it was whirling real fast. But when they moved it a few inches away, it would relax. So 10 days after the UFO encounters, Betty began having a series of vivid dreams. This continued for 5 successive nights, and she mentioned that she experienced them with a degree of detail and intensity she'd never had in a dream before. After the 5th night, they stopped, never recurred, but they occupied her thoughts during the day. So determined to recover their lost memories, the Hills opted to partake in hypnosis sessions. So, Barney recalled driving the car away from the UFO, but afterwards he felt compelled to pull off the road and drive into the woods, eventually spotting 6 men standing on the dirt road. The car stalled and 3 of the men approached the car, telling Barney not to fear them. Obviously, Barney's still anxious, and he reported that the leader told him to close his eyes. While hypnotized, Barney said, "I felt like the eyes had pushed into my eyes." This was a statement he would repeat each and every session. So then, time to be brought on the ship and examination time. Betty and Barney realized that during the examinations, they removed their clothes, the alien beings that is. They plucked strands of their hair, they took clippings of their nails, they scraped their skin. Each sample was placed on a clear material, not unlike a glass slide. There were syringes connected to long wires that probed their heads, arms, legs, and spines. One particularly large one, around 4 to 6 inches long, was inserted into Betty's belly, and this left her twisting in pain. And throughout this entire time, a being that Barney and Betty called the leader watched from the side. After Betty's examination ended, the beings rushed back into her room excited. They discovered that Barney's teeth could be removed. Betty laughed, explaining that Barney had dentures, a fact of human aging the beings struggled to understand. Later, when alone with the leader, Betty asked where the craft had flown, admitting she knew very little of the universe. And the being joked with her, saying, "If you don't know where you are, there won't be any point in telling you where I am." Even though this story was so many years ago, the Hills stuck by it, despite doubts from scientists and experts. Barney passed away sadly of a stroke in 1969, and Betty was adamant. She never varied from the story until she passed away in 2004. This experience kicked off an Air Force inquiry, part of the secretive initiative Project Blue Book that investigated UFO sightings across the country. The incident would also become the first ever widely publicized alien abduction account and shape how stories like it were told and understood from then on. Now, obviously, we are in 2024, debates do continue as to whether the husband and wife were liars, if they were writing fantasy novels, or if they were just simply sleep-deprived people who later recovered seriously scrambled memories. But all in all, this story would arguably become the most famous UFO abductee story ever. One historian even said, the Hills were the Adam and Eve of alien abduction stories. The couple's tale was turned into a best-selling book and a movie starring James Earl Jones, may he rest in peace, and it has provided the template for nearly every depiction of alien encounters in pop culture sense. Now, there is a new book that claims the story maybe isn't so much about aliens as it could be about race. The Hills, an interracial couple who were also very prominent civil rights activists, told a story that reflected their growing disenchantment with the slow progress of the civil rights movement at the time. At least this is a claim from historian Matthew Bowman, who wrote this in The Abduction of Betty and Barney Hill, Alien Encounters, Civil Rights, and the New Age in America. So seeing as it's almost Halloween time, Bowman's book claims to offer an unexpected racial dimension to the story. He thinks that it might have been a story of racism instead of a story of abduction. He mentioned that Barney would have struggled with racism as a black man in that time period, and that might have been a deep part of this encounter. He mentioned that when Barney was hypnotized and recovered all these memories, the language he uses was very much similar to that of those being persecuted at the time. Both Hills did recall the encounter under hypnosis, but Barney was the one who really grew terrified reliving the event. At one point, he sobbed as he recounted the UFO closing in on him, saying, "God, what is it? God, I'm scared." When you think about it, the Hills story really did change the way people regarded alien encounters. Before this, most people reported friendly encounters with UFOs and aliens. Aliens used to be these noble and giving visitors, these gods, if we're talking about like the Anunnaki theory. But the Hills added an element of horror to these stories, with the details, the gray-skinned aliens with the large head, the black eyes, the missing periods of time, the forced medical examinations. These elements became staples in so much of pop culture afterwards.